Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to make this 3-stone ring in Rhino. We will start off by creating a new file, and we'll use the small objects millimeters template. Now eventually I hope to show you how to create a custom template, but for now we'll use this, which comes standard with Rhino. And I know that normally I jump in with the curves at this point, but this time I want to set up the layers first. So I'm going to rename some of these. To rename a layer, you click on it and then click on the label. I want to rename this red layer to cutters, and I want to rename the blue layer to curves and the green layer to gems. We can delete this one and we can delete this white one. I prefer my gems layer to be a light blue. So I'm going to click on this green square here. We'll get this color pop-up. Change this drop down to HSV sliders and set the values to 200, 40, and 100. If you want the light blue color, you can leave it green, that's fine. And then cutters, I prefer that to be orange. If you want to change it to this orange color, the values are 40, 190, again under the HSV sliders. I want the cutters layer to be last, so I'll move it down below the gems layer. Okay, now you can change your active layer by double clicking on a layer, and then it becomes the active layer, and then whatever you make would be on that layer. So here we've made some kind of plane and it is on the blue layer now. But I tend to work in the default layer and then move things to other layers as I need to. But you can do it either way. Okay, so now we've got the layers set up. We can move on to laying in the curves. Okay, we'll start off over here in the front view. We'll double click on it, and to maximize it, we're going to lay in the sizing circle. It's going to be a size 6, which has a diameter of 16.51. We'll move the curve seam to the bottom quad. And now we'll work on laying in the bottom arc. To do that, we'll lay in a couple of points. We'll snap one here to the left quad and one here to the bottom quad. We'll move the left point out by 1.9 millimeters, and we'll move the bottom point down by 1.7 millimeters. We'll lay in an ellipse, the center of the world, and we'll snap first to one point and then to the other, and then we'll mirror this point over along the green axis here, and we'll split this ellipse by these 2 points here and delete the top. Alright, so now we've got the sizing circle and the bottom arc laid in, and we're ready to bring in the gemstones. Okay, now we can bring in a gemstone. I will bring in a realistic round brilliant, and I will also bring in kind of a basic round gemstone shape. I'm just going to pull that one over to the side here, and let's look at that in perspective view. So the realistic stone, of course, has facets, and this basic gem shape does not. You don't actually have to have the realistic gemstone. You do have to have at least this. I'm going to be using both in this tutorial. This realistic gemstone, main purpose is to let you produce realistic renders. So unless you're going to be producing realistic renders, you don't have to have that. If you don't have either of these, I have a tutorial on how to create this one. I'll leave a link to that below in the description of the video. You can go and follow that tutorial and then import it into this tutorial here. Just save it somewhere on your computer where you can remember how to get to it, and then use File, Import to bring it into this scene here. Now, if for some reason you have a realistic model but not a basic model, what you'll want to do is go into the front view, make sure you have project turned on and your end and intersect and quad snaps. Get to the polyline tool and just snap to this corner, the top of the girdle, the bottom of the girdle, and the cullet or bottom of the stone, and then hit enter. And you can hide that real quick. To hide things, I usually select them and then type H and hit enter. Grab this curve that you just made with the polyline tool and revolve it around the green axis here, and then cap it. So if we come into the top here, you can see that the top is open, and you'll need to use cap planar to cap that. And that way this will match exactly the gemstone that you have. So you would want to do that instead of following the tutorial, because if you follow the tutorial, it might not match your particular gemstone. Now if you go to revolve this and for some reason you don't get a full revolution, so remember, let's just back up here. So you run revolve, says select curves to revolve, that's this one, hit enter. Start of revolve axis, we're going to let that be the center of the world. Remember, we're in the front view here. Hold down shift and click anywhere along this green line to do the end of the revolve axis. And then you get to choose the start angle of 0. If it doesn't say 0 there, you'll have to type 0 and hit enter. And the revolution angle needs to be 360. If it doesn't say 360, you'll need to type 360 and then hit enter. Usually it already says 0 and 360, and so you can just go enter, enter. And I'll just cap that real quick again. Okay, but either way, as long as you end up with this basic gemstone shape, and then I am going to type show and bring back my realistic model, so now I have both of them. And we're going to put the realistic model on the gems layer, and we'll put the basic model on the cutters layer. So I'm just right clicking on the layer and then clicking on change object layer with the object I want selected. Now I want our gem to be 5 millimeters across, and they come in from my library at 10 millimeters. I'm going to select both of these, the realistic and the basic model. I'm going to hold down shift, and while I'm holding shift, I'm going to click on this scale handle here. We'll get this text box. Once that text box pops up, you can let go of the shift key. You don't have to keep holding it. And what we're going to do is type the measurement that we want, which is 5, divided by the measurement that it is. For me, that's 10. But now if you had your own gemstone library, whatever size that it comes in at, that's what you'll need to put in instead of 10. Okay. Now, if you don't know the size, you can come to the drafting tab and grab this tool right here, horizontal dimension, and then just snap to one corner of the gemstone and then to the other side, and that'll give you the dimension, the width of it. So if I type 5 divided by 10, I get a 5 millimeter stone. Now I'm going to delete this. I don't need that anymore. Now we want to move the top of this gemstone to the top of the sizing circle. You can just eyeball that. You don't have to be super precise. You can just eyeball it like that. That's fine. You can be precise though. To be precise, you would go to transform and grab the move tool. Make sure that you have project turned on and your end and intercept and quad snaps. And just snap to the top of the stone and click, and then snap to the top of the sizing circle and click. Whether you eyeball it or whether you are precise about it, from this point, click on the top arrow here and type 5 to move it up 5 millimeters more from that point. Okay, now we're going to create the basket, the gallery rails of the basket at least. And there's various ways that you could do this. You could create a line starting from here and hit both sides, and you could make it be whatever angle you want. But what I'm going to do is come from the center of the world to the edge of the stone. So I'm going to grab the line tool. I'm going to type 0 to start it off in the center of the world. I'm going to snap to the bottom corner of the girdle there. I'm going to tap the tab key, and that's going to lock us in at this angle here. I'm going to come up slightly above the top of the gem and hit enter. And then I'm going to offset this line by 0.15. Now typically I would offset it by 0.1, but I did that and got further into the modeling process, and it ended up really needing it to be a little bit more offset here. And if I can remember, I'll explain more about that when we reach that stage of the modeling procedure. But okay, so we'll delete this original line. We don't need it. And we're going to draw a line here from the center of the world. We're going to activate both sides. Hold down Shift and just pull out to the side, and then raise this line up. We just want a nice flat line, and we'll have it stop somewhere around here. And we're using this to trim this line. So with this line selected, run the trim command and then click on the bottom part of this line, and it will disappear. Hit enter to finish the trim command. And then we're going to revolve this around to the other side. I'm sorry, we won't revolve it to the other side. We're going to revolve it to create a cone. So with that line selected, run the revolve command. Start of revolve axis will be, it can be the center of the world, or it could be the top of the sizing circle, or it can be the bottom of the gemstone. I'm going to use the center of the world. The end of the revolve axis just needs to be somewhere around along this green axis. So hold down Shift and click somewhere on that axis, and then hit enter, enter. And you should get a full revolution, and you should have this cone shape now. Okay, now we're going to select this cone, and we're going to give it some thickness using offset surface. So under surface tools, click on offset surface, and you want your arrows pointing in. So click on the cone to make them go in if they're pointing out, or you can click on flip all up in the command line. Either way, you want them pointing in. We're going to use a distance of 1, so it's already set to that, and we want solid set to yes. And corner probably needs to be set to sharp. Both sides should be set to no, and everything else seems fine here. So we're just going to hit enter, and you can see now that has given our cone some thickness. I'm going to click on this straight line here, and I'm going to lift it up. While I'm lifting it, I'm going to tap the Alt key. You can see now there's a plus sign by my mouse. That means we're making a copy. So I'm just going to drag this right under the girdle of the stone, and then from there I'm going to move it down 0.2 of a millimeter. I'm going to offset this by 1.4 millimeters, and I'm going to offset this, the sizing circle, by 1 millimeter. Okay, now I want to make a shape out of these two curves here. So what we're going to do is just draw a line from here to here, crossing both of those lines, and it needs to be outside the cone. Now you can just draw another line on the other side, doing the same thing. You can also mirror this across. So I have shortcut keys programmed in a gamer's keypad, so I can go like this, and I can mirror it across that quickly. So that's typically what I do. But if you don't have that gamer's keypad and you don't have them programmed in, then you would have to either manually come up here and mirror it, or you can just draw another line. It doesn't have to be precisely the same as the other line. We just need a shape out here. So select all of these lines, and then come to the curve tools and click on curve boolean and click in this shape. Make sure that delete input is set to all and hit enter. Okay, we're going to select this cone, and we're going to make sure you're in the front viewport. We're going to come to solid tools, and we're going to use the wire cut command. So click on wire cut with the cone selected, and then click on this upper line here, hit enter a couple of times, we want to delete the top, and it's going to delete the part that's highlighted in yellow. So to change the selection, you just click on the screen somewhere and it will invert the selection. So now that this is highlighted in yellow, I can just hit enter. We'll select the cone. I'm going to hit enter, and that will run the last command, which in this case is the wire cut command. And then we will select this curve and we'll hit enter a couple of times. And I want to delete this part, so I'm going to click and then hit enter. Select the cone, hit enter to repeat the wire cut command. Select the sizing circle, hit enter a couple of times, and again just click until you get this part inside the sizing circle highlighted in yellow, and then hit enter. We don't need these curves anymore, so I'm going to delete them. And if we turn off the cutter and the gem and go to perspective view, you can see the gallery rails. So I prefer them to be filleted, and at this point I'll go ahead and do that. So we'll run the fillet command, make sure that next radius is set to 0.2. You can also just type your radius out here. So we could type 0.3 for instance, and you can see that now next radius is set to 0.3. I want to set it to 0.2 though. I'm going to just box select both gallery rails and hit enter a couple of times. And there you go. So we can bring these back. We've got the first gem laid in, and now we can lay in the side gem. Okay, so to create the side gem, what we're going to do is just select both the cutter and the gem here. I'm going to pull them down, and while I'm dragging them down, I'm going to tap the Alt key. It's going to make a copy, and I'm just going to bring it down until it's out of the way down here. I still want it in the center though. I'm going to, with both of them selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and click on this scale handle here, and I want this to be a 4mm gem. So we're going to type 4 divided by the size that the gem currently is, which it is 5mm. So this is now a 4mm gemstone. I'm going to bring this up until the top is touching the top of the sizing circle, and from there I'm going to move it up 4.6mm. But you know what, before I do that, I'm just going to hide all of this. So I'm going to select all of it and type the letter H and then hit enter. And we'll bring this up. I'll do it precisely this time. We'll snap it from here to here, and then from here I want to move it up 4.96. So if we bring everything back by typing show, okay, that is not what I wanted. It must have been 4.6. Let me try 4.6. Yes, I think that was it. So I'm going to bring this back down, select everything and hide it, and then we will move that to there and then move it up 4.6. Okay, now this from here on, we're going to set this up, create the gallery rails, and then rotate it off to the side. The part of creating the gallery rails will be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is just go through it. I'm going to speed up the video, and I'm not going to explain anything. It'll just be exactly what I've already done, except that the gemstone is smaller. Okay, so we've got the two gallery rails for the side stones set up. I'm going to go ahead and fillet the edges just like before with 0.2 fillets. You might also, if you're used to Blender or some other piece of software like that, you might call these bevels. In Rhino, they call them fillets. Okay, I'm going to select everything here, and I'm just going to rotate it off to the side by a fair amount. So from the front view, I don't need this line anymore, and I'm going to bring back the middle stone by typing show. I'm going to lay in a line right here. I'm going to hold down Shift and pull down to make it be a perfectly straight up and down line. And I'm just going to pull it over until it touches the side of the center stone. And then I'm going to offset that by 0.1. And we'll select all of this over here and we'll rotate it back up until the edge of this stone is touching this line here. So I'm rotating from the center of the world, and I can snap to the corner of this gemstone and then snap to that line. Now you can see that there's some overlap here between the two gallery rails, and that is brought about by, you may recall, I said I had this original line and that normally I would offset it by 0.1. But I wanted a little extra overlap. There was some overlap between these two gallery rails, but I wanted a little extra. So I offset it by 0.15, and that's how I end up with this, you know, a certain amount of overlap here. And that just seemed to work a little better. So we can actually select all of this and mirror it over to the other side. And now we have our three stones. And what we need to do now is lay in our shank. Okay, so to lay in the shank, we're going to start off from the front view here. We're going to lay in a point. And we'll just put it somewhere here by the left side stone. We'll come to Curve Tools and Curve Blend here. And we're going to click on this end of the bottom arc. And then come up into the command line and click on Point. And then click on this point. Make sure that it's set to tangency here and not position or even curvature. You want tangency. Okay. We're going to offset this by 1.4 millimeters. And then come back to Curve Blend and click on these at the ends of these two lines. And make sure that both 1 and 2 are set to position. So position doesn't attempt to blend the curves, it just connects them with a line. Whereas tangency would try to kind of do a blend. And curvature does a blend, but with more control points. And G3 uses even more control points, and G4 uses a ton of control points. Typically, I'm going to use either tangency or position. You can even combine them. But in this case, we want both to be set to position. And then we'll offset the sizing circle by 0.9. And then we can move this point. And we have a history enabled kind of sketch or guide to how we want this shank to be. I'm going to pull it over here for a minute and we'll select these three lines and mirror them over to the other side along the center axis here. So I'm just going to move this point in here. And that looks about right as far as our shank is concerned. And then I'm going to lay in a couple of lines right here. So you can see we've got the kind of a cross section of the bottom gallery rail. And this line, if we ran it through the middle of it, let's kind of come past the center of that cross section a little bit. And we'll mirror this line over to the other side as well. Now select all of these lines, including the sizing circle and this bottom arc, and then come to Curve Tools and Curve Boolean and click here and here and make sure it says Delete Input Set to All, and then hit Enter, and you end up with this shank shape here. We're going to make a 2.2 millimeter wide shank. So just come to Solid Tools and Extrude and make sure it's set to both sides equals yes, and then just type 1.1 and it will make a 2.2 millimeter shank. Now I may show you some more advanced shank options at the end of the video, but here we'll just kind of go with what I did in my speed model. So we're going to come into the front view here and grab the fillet tool, set our radius to 0.1, and then just box select over that corner and over this corner. Hit enter a couple of times and you'll get a fillet there. And then come into perspective view, click on the shank, and let's isolate it. And then come back to the fillet tool and set the radius to 0.2. And we will select the inside here and hit enter a couple of times. And then you would normally, I'll hit enter to repeat the radius command. If you just do that, you'll have to click on each segment. But if you hit chain edges and then click on one of the edges, it will go ahead and select all of the connected edges. So hit enter, chain edges, click, enter, chain edges, and click. And then hit enter about 3 times. So once you run the chain edges part, then you need to hit enter 3 times instead of just twice. Okay, finally we're going to put some rather large fillets on the outside here, 0.5 fillets. So just type 0.5 and then click on these outside edges here. Hit enter a couple times and there you go. Alright, so we have our shank laid in and our 3 stones. We are ready to move on to the prongs. The prongs is actually going to be fairly complex, so I apologize about that, but there's just no way around it. But anyway, we'll do the prongs next. Okay, so we're ready to lay in our prongs. You know, before we do that, I just want to mention I set up these layers at the very beginning, and it looks like I'm not even using the curves layer, and that's okay. I tend to work out of the default layer, and then if the curves become messy, then or distracting, I tend to move them into the curves layer. So I have just probably not ever going to get to the point where I need them moved to the curves layer. Maybe I will, or maybe I won't. So I just wanted to clarify that just because I'm not using that layer, it's not anything to worry about. I may use it or I may not. So far I've only used the gems, cutters, and the default layer. But anyway, we are ready to lay in the prongs, and to do that we're going to use something called flow along curve. So I just want to give a very brief explanation about flow along curve. So I'm going to hide the ring here real quick. And the basic idea of flow along curve is that you're going to flow an object from a simple curve to a more complex curve. So we're going to lay in a complex curve right here. I'll have a complex shape, and typically it doesn't have just a complex shape, although it can. It very often will have a complex orientation as well. So, you know, it's just complex in every conceivable way. And then there will usually be a simple curve, and that in this case is going to be a straight line. And we will flow an object from the simple curve to the complex curve. And the simple curve is usually oriented simply too. So in this case it's on the floor plane and it's starting at the green line here. Although it can be over here, that's fine as well. But it's straight and on the floor plane. Okay. So we'll talk about a couple of different things with this. I'm going to duplicate this line here, and then I'm also going to make another line. We'll get the length off of this. So that's 9.705 millimeters. So I'm going to make a line that is that long, 9.705. All right, and I will move this line way back here. So we've got 3 different lines set up here, and we're going to put some spheres on the ends of all of them. I'll just move this in a little bit, and we will duplicate this put one on each line, and kind of zoom in here. Okay, so when you flow an object from one curve to the other curve, you're using this icon here. You typically want copy set to yes. I'm going to set rigid to no for right now, and we're going to flow from here to here. Okay, so you can see that it's very distorted, the sphere is, and we're going to move the sphere from this end of the curve to this end of the curve. And so there's a couple things to notice here. One is that once we get to this end of the curve, we have not reached the end of the target curve. So just in case I didn't say, this would be considered the base curve and this would be considered the target curve. Okay, and the reason that it is not going from one end to the other end of the target curve is because we had stretch set to no. Now, if our line is the same length, we will flow this one on there right now. And in this case, both lines are the same length. If we move this over to the other end, you can see that it moves over to the other end as well, because the lines are the same length. This is a copy with history, so it's trying to follow along, and I want to turn that off. Break the history by just moving this sphere independently of this one. Okay, so in this case, sometimes you want this distortion. Sometimes that's very useful. For laying in prongs, it's not useful. So we're going to deal with that as well. So to get rid of the distortion, what we want to do is set rigid to yes. So we will flow from this curve to this curve. You can see now our sphere is no longer distorted. Okay, but we still have the issue where it doesn't go from one end to the other end. Again, you can overcome that by making your base curve the same length as your target curve, or you can, when you do flow along curve, make sure that you set stretch to yes before you actually complete the flow. Okay, so this is the setup that we're going to use. We're going to have a rigid set to a yes, and we're going to have stretch set to yes and copy set to yes. None of the other, I don't think any of the other options matter to us. So copy yes, rigid yes, and stretch set to yes. Okay, so that is the basic idea. Now typically you are going from the simple curve to the complex curve. There are a few cases where you would go the other direction. So I'm going to delete these spheres right now. Let's lay in a point on this curve, and we will flow it over to the target curve, and we'll move it along here. Okay, now occasionally, just for gathering reference points, you may want to flow an object from the complex curve to the simple curve, and this is just to gather to get a reference point on your complex curve. So you do the very same thing. It's that your base curve is the complex curve and your target curve is the simple curve. And then once you have this reference point, then you can start working on modeling something over on the simple curve to flow over to the complex curve. And we're going to be doing that. We will be getting some reference points as well. Okay, so that is a brief explanation of flow along curve. I hope that made some sense. And now we can actually get into the business of laying in these prongs. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is create our target curves. And for the center stone, that's going to be basically this quadrant of the circle that makes up the stone. And for the side stone, it's going to be this half circle here. The reason for this is we're going to have symmetry on the center stone, this prong. We're going to mirror this prong both across the x-axis here, and then we're going to mirror it also across the y-axis. So the prong on the center stone is going to have symmetry in both directions, but the prongs on this stone will be different from each other. This one will be different from this prong. So it will have symmetry, but only across in this, going from here to here. So that's why we need a half circle here. So there's two ways to get your your target curves. The first one, if you've got your basic gem shapes here, is to use duplicate edge, and just click on this bottom of the girdle on each stone and hit enter, and that'll be the target curves. Now we'll need to make some adjustments to them because we don't need the entire circle for both stones, but that would be the easiest way to get it, is to just hit duplicate edge on the bottoms of the girdles of the two stones. Now, if you don't have, for some reason, you don't have these basic gem shapes, and for whatever reason you've just got the realistic gems, and that's fine. Although if you're following along in this particular tutorial, you should have the basic gem shapes, but it is possible in a real world situation where you're not following a tutorial to just have the realistic stones and not have the gem shapes, the basic gem shapes laid in yet. So there's another way to get your circles in that case. This is only going to work, this second method would only work if the stones are straight up and down in the side view. But if they are, you can come to the front view and grab the circle tool and click 2-point and vertical up in the command line, and then just snap from one end of the girdle to the other end. And I recommend you use the bottom of the girdle, but at the very least, if you do the top, make sure you do the top on both sides. And we will just hit enter to repeat that command, and again do 2-point and vertical and snap from one edge of the girdle to the other edge of the girdle on the side stone. And it looks like lines, but if we take the stones away, you can see that we've actually made circles. Okay, now we do not need the entire circle, we just need the quadrant, one quadrant of the of this stone here, and we need a half circle for the other one. I'm going to click on these two circles and isolate them visually, and then from the front view I'm going to lay in a line from the center of the world. Hold down shift and just click somewhere on this green axis, somewhere above the circles. I'm going to select that line and then run the trim command, and I'm going to click on this half of that circle, of the center stone, and you can see that it deleted it. And now we'll go to the right view and we'll click on this side. We'll click on each circle on the left side of the line here, and now we're done. We can hit enter and we can delete this line that we made, and you see now we've got one quadrant of the center stone, and we've got a half circle for the side stone. Okay, so basically we have a short line and a long line. So we're going to make two lines down here. These are our target curves. We're going to make our base curves now. So we're going to make a short line for the quadrant, and we'll make another one, and it will be a long line, and we'll make that will be for the half circle. So it doesn't matter, you know, how short and how long. It's just something to let us know that one is for the quadrant and then one is for the half circle. That's why one is long and one is short. They could be the same length if you really wanted to, but I think this is better. You know, we need some kind of way to differentiate between the two as far as the base curves are concerned. You know, to help us know which one is the base curve for which target curve. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back our ring and our gemstones, and we will get some reference points. And I just want the curves. So let's get the curves, and let's get the gemstones and the gallery rails, and then these two curves. Select all of that and let's isolate them. Okay. And now I want to lay in some reference points. And let's, in the perspective view, let's turn off project if we have project turned on. And we do want our quad snaps turned on. And we're going to snap to here and to here. We're going to put points there, and we're going to do the same thing to these two gallery rails. And this is going to help us get the angle of the prongs. You'll see. So now we can turn these gems off, I think, for now. We're going to select these 2 points, and just for getting reference points this time around, our base curve is going to be up here by the gems, and our target curves are going to be down here. Okay, and again, making sure we've got rigid set to yes and stretch set to yes. All right, now we're going to select these 2 points and do the same thing. We're going to flow from this curve to this curve. And I'm going to just do that again. And let's make sure we're looking at the command line. So we're going to run the command. It says base curve, select near one end. So I'm going to select this. In this case, this is our base curve. And I'm going to select this end. And then it says target curve, select near matching end. So it is important which end that you click on. So this end of this curve is corresponding to this end of this curve. And this end of this curve is corresponding to this end of this curve. Once you get used to flow along curve, it will start making a lot more sense. You just have to get in there and use it a lot before, it starts off probably feeling kind of confusing. But now these points are just reference points for us, and we don't need them anymore up here. So I'm just going to delete these points. And we'll come in, I'm gonna lay in a point on the ends of each line. If we come into the side view, you can see that we cannot see the lines where they actually are. But if we lay a couple of points, snap a couple of points to the end of each line, we can now see where the lines are. Now I'm going to turn on project again, and we're going to be working in the right hand view here. I'm going to snap a line from this point to this point, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Because I've got project on, look here in perspective view, you can see that even though I'm snapping to these 2 points, you can see that it is being projected over to this plane here. Okay, so these points have served their purpose. I'm going to delete these points. They were just to help us lay in this line at the correct angle, and these points were doing the same thing for us. So I'm going to delete those as well. Okay, now I'm going to flow these 2 lines from these curves over to these curves. So now it's the way that it typically would be. We're going to be flowing from the simple curves to the complex curves. So we're going to flow this line from this curve to this curve. And here is that line now, right here. Okay, and we'll do the same thing to this line. Now we're actually going to duplicate this line. So I'm just going to pull this arrow here, and while I'm dragging it, I'm going to tap the Alt key, and now you can see I'm making a copy. So I'm going to flow both of these lines from this curve over to this curve. And you can see here is one line and here is the other. All right. Now I am going to, these lines are going to be the basis of our prongs. We're going to use pipe with round caps. So I'm going to select this line. We're going to click on pipe with round caps. And we're going to give this a radius of 0.9. I'm sorry, a diameter of 0.9. So just type in 0.9 and then hit enter, I guess 3 times. And then we will select these 2 lines. And so you select the one and hold down shift and select the other. We'll run pipe with round caps again, but this time we're going to give it a diameter of 0.8. Make sure that it says pipe diameter and not pipe radius. If it says radius, switch to diameter. 0.8. Okay, so now we've got our prongs in here. Now this, of course, is not where we want this prong. So I'm going to move this back a little bit. And you can see as I move this line is moving as well. That's because it has history. So I'm just going to move it a little bit by itself. That'll break history. Now we can move this one without that one moving. And that's probably a good starting point for that, for this prong here. Now they're too short. Our prongs are way too short. I'm going to bring our gems back in real quick, and we'll just eyeball this. What we want to do from the front view, I guess, is we want our prongs to come above this gemstone. We want at least this seam here to be a little bit above the top at the very least. So that's this prong. This line is that prong right here. I'm going to turn on the edit points, and we'll select this top edit point. As we move it, you can see it kind of keeps a shadow, or a kind of a ghost of where the original line was. We're going to use that as a guide for the to maintain the angle of the prong. It doesn't have to be 100%. It just we want to roughly keep that angle. So I'm just making this line a little bit longer. Like I said, we want this half round end cap on the pipe to definitely be above the stone. You can see right now it's still a little bit below. Just going to zoom in here and raise that up a little bit more. That's probably good. All right, now we also want the bottoms to come definitely below the sizing circle. So we want this seam to be all the way under here. So we're going to grab the bottom control point, and again, being careful to maintain that angle, we're going to pull it down a little bit. All right, and that's good. We don't have to be perfect with that. We just definitely need this to be underneath that. Same thing with these two. I'm going to select both of them, turn on the edit points, and then I'm going to grab the bottom points down here and just pull until, yes, so they're all now definitely under, within the sizing circle, these round spherical caps. You could mess around with it and try to get a little bit closer if you wanted. They don't have to be that far under the sizing circle, but they just have to be under the sizing circle or below the sizing circle. So even if they do stick out quite a bit, it's no big deal. We're going to trim them later. Okay, now we will come here, and we just want the spheres, these half spheres on the end caps, to be definitely above the top of the stone here. To help me visualize that a little better, I'm going to turn off the control points, and we're going to pull these. We'll pull at least one of them this way, so that I can tell, so it won't be off to the side here. It'll be in line with the top of the stone. So if this line is over here, I'm going to have more difficulty judging this. Here, I will show you. I'll select both lines, turn on the edit points, and we'll grab these top edit points and pull them up a little bit, being careful to maintain that angle. So you can definitely do it. It's just that I have to kind of visually, run a line out this way with my eyes to worry about this. Whereas if I move at least this prong in this way, then I can, I've definitely got the top of the stone that I can use as a guide to let me know when I've got these prongs tall enough. I want them a little bit taller than this. So again, I'm going to select both of these lines, turn on edit points, and then grab both of the edit points for the tops of these two prongs. I'm just going to pull them up a little bit more. It almost looks like I should be working on them individually and not together. I'm going to pull them down just a fuzz. That's a little bit too tall probably. And let's see, maybe if we work on this one individually, we'll pull it in as well over here. No, I guess they're fine. So I'll Control Z that. Just seems taller over here. I guess I'm going to pull it down a little bit. I don't know if that's an illusion or what, but I think I will pull that down just a fuzz. Something like that is probably fine. I wonder if when I pull this one back off to the side, if it's going to feel much taller. I guess that seems okay. If we drew a line like this across the top of this stone, oops. I guess we were better off leaving them together. So I'm just going to Control Z back until they are the same as each other. And we won't worry too much about it. That's probably good right there. So I don't want to belabor the point too much. And now how tall your prong should be, that's actually going to be between you and your jeweler, or if you are the jeweler. Each jeweler is probably going to have kind of like an ideal height they like their prongs to be. So just communicate with your jeweler, and you'll get used to eventually how tall your prong should be. And there can be a difference too between main stones, like these are all main stones, and little accent stones. So you'll have like 2 or 3 or 4 main stones sometimes, and typically I would say, in my experience, the jewelers like those prongs to be a little taller than on accent stones. I have like 50 accent stones, and at least the jeweler that I worked with for all those years, he liked those to be kind of short so that he didn't have to do a lot of finish work on them, on the little accent stones. But that's just going to really vary probably from jeweler to jeweler. And if you're your own jeweler, well, of course, that's the ideal situation. You know exactly how tall you want your prongs to be. All right, so now one more thing. We want to move this prong here more over to kind of like the 45-degree. So if we're looking at it from the top, I'll lay in a line from the center of the world, and at a 45-degree angle, we would like this prong to be more over here. So that is the halfway point. So if we were to select the quadrant here, that would be the halfway point of the quadrant. So we need to move this prong right here to the halfway point of this base curve. So you select the prong, all right, and then you can use move, the move command, snap to the end of this base curve, and then snap to the midpoint of the base curve. Okay, and you can see that has moved the prong to the 45-degree angle over here. Now something else we want to do is we want to line up these prongs with relation to the gemstones better. So they need to overlap, but we want them to overlap the gemstones by a specific amount. And right now they're just overlapping by some random amount. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the right view, and we're going to move these lines until they intersect these points right here. Remember, these points represent, from the side view, our base curves. So I'm just going to move this over here until it goes across that point. And if we look, if I hit Control Z, watch this prong here, you can see that we've really moved it until what's happening is it's overlapping the stone by half the thickness of the prong. Now that actually isn't where we finally want the prong. That's just our starting point. I'm going to do the same thing with these two lines. So I'm selecting both lines down here in the side view like this. I'm selecting both lines. I'm doing that by box selecting from right to left. So whatever touches the box gets selected. Okay, I'm just going to move the lines back until they go through that point, which means that they're touching these base curves. So once again, you can see that these prongs are overlapping the gemstone by half. So now what we want to do is move these out by half the thickness of the prong. So these prongs are 0.8 millimeters thick, so we're going to move these out 0.4. Okay, and so now they're kissing the gemstone, just barely kissing the gemstone. Okay, and we'll do the same thing with this one. So I'll grab the line and we'll move it out. Now in this case, this is a 0.9 millimeter prong, so half of that would be 0.45. Now if you've ever got a thickness of a prong, you need to move the line out by half of the thickness, but you don't know in your head what the half of the thickness is. You can just type the thickness, so 0.9 divided by 2, right in the text box. Okay, so now this prong is just kissing that stone. Now what we want to do, we'll just grab all of them and move them back by negative 0.2. And now all the prongs will be overlapping the gemstones by 0.2 millimeters. And if that's a little too much, maybe you just want them to overlap by 0.5, then 0.15, then you could just move them back by negative 0.15, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to move them back by negative 0.2. Okay, so now we need to work on the positioning of the prongs a little bit better. I'm going to turn the stones off. We want this prong to intersect this gallery rail a little bit, and it is. So if it didn't intersect it enough, we don't want it to intersect too much, and we don't want it to intersect too little. The way you would adjust that is that's this prong right here, right? Is you would just move that until it was a proper amount of intersection. So, you know, this is a little bit too much. So you would move it along this curve here, which would move it along this curve until you had a good amount of intersection. So maybe a little bit further this way, and that's probably good right there. All right, we get a little bit of intersection with this center top gallery rail. So I mean the prong connects to it a little bit, and but not too much. Okay, and you want typically with these 3 stone rings, you want the corner prong of the center stone to kind of merge with the bottom of the prong here, but you want it to have kind of a gap between them up here, which is what we've got going on now, but we probably could stand it to stand for them to be a little closer. So I'm just going to move this prong a little bit this way, and that's probably good right there. If you were ever in a situation where you wanted maybe to have a little more control over the bottom overlap and the top space, you could come into the front view, turn on your control points, and you can move the top and bottom independently of each other from the front view. So we could actually slide the top of the prong closer to that prong if we wanted. I don't want to do that. This is looking pretty good right here, but I just want you to know this is an option for you. You could slide the top of the prong independently of the bottom of the prong, which is a pretty powerful technique. All right, let's bring back not only our gems, but also our shank by typing show. And now we want to work on this prong here. So we want there to be some overlap, a little bit of intersection between this prong and the shank. I want a little bit more than that. So what we're going to do is we'll be moving this line a little bit here. I'm not sure how can I guess if I do this and work in the top view over here, so I can watch here and move in the top view. So we probably want to move it a little bit further this way, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that's probably good right there. Now there is a slight problem here, and that is that the bottom of the prong is, overlapping the bottom part of the shank here more so than the upper part of the shank. So you could just leave it like that. That's one way to handle that. Another thing you could do is, like I mentioned for this prong over here, you could come in, turn on your control points, and grab that bottom of the prong. You could move it back this way along, basically moving it the bottom of the prong this way, which is going to reduce that intersection down here. You can also move it this way to kind of lift it out as well. So you get kind of a similar amount of overlap, or maybe a little more than you do at the top. So you would work on that till it's to your satisfaction. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good, so we'll leave it like that. Now there is another way to handle this issue, which involves leaving the prong alone, let it have its own natural angle, and then actually kind of squeeze the shank in down here. And maybe I'll cover that toward the end of the video. After we've covered everything else, I might go over some advanced shank techniques with you guys. Okay? But this definitely works, and it's quick and dirty. So we've already got our shank, and we can just move that prong out a little bit so that it's not overlapping so much. You could also, like I said, you could just leave it overlapping more at the bottom than the top. That's also a valid solution to that issue. All right. So now I'm not liking this. The shank is not connecting good in there. We could maybe fix that by overlapping the prong a little bit more. Let's see if we just move it a little bit more this way, if that fixes that. So I guess we can move it a little bit more. And that almost fixes it, but I think what I'm going to do is we're just going to redo the shank. Okay, so I hate to do that, but we're just going to take a break here from the prongs and just redo the shank. I am sorry about that, but what we're going to do is we'll come in from the front here. We'll delete really everything. While we have this, I'm going to draw a line right here, and we'll select that one line and just hold down Shift and expand it. So we've got our same line that we had before, and we'll mirror that across. Oh, I'm so sorry that we're having to do this, guys. Okay, we'll lay in our sizing circle again, and it was 16.51. We'll bring don't forget to bring the curve seam down. And you may not have to do this. If you're following along in the tutorial, you may have moved your point here in a little further than I did, and if you did, you may not have this issue. Okay, and the issue, just to kind of reiterate, is that the shank here is kind of not connected totally to this gallery rail, and the prong is not really totally covering that up. You could leave it at this way. That would probably be okay, but I'm just a little OCD and I don't want to do that. So we're gonna go back. At least I'm going to. You may not have to, like I said. Okay, so I'm going to lay in an ellipse. Oops, that was not an ellipse. Here we go. And we're going to split that by these 2 points right here. And then we're going to blend from here and then point in the command line. We're going to click on this point here. Make sure we've got it set to tangency, and we'll mirror that across, and we'll offset that by 1.4, and this one as well, and we'll offset this by 0.9, and then we will blend these two curves, the ends of them together using position, and then we can change this around like that. So what it is we just need to pull this in a little further this way, and that's probably going to be fine right there. So we'll try this again. We'll select all of these curves. It's a little harder to do now with more stuff on the screen, and I'm so sorry about this. Okay, we will use curve boolean, set delete input to all, and there we go. And we will extrude this by 1.1, and now I'm just real quickly gonna fillet everything, and I'm not going to explain my process. I'm just gonna kind of speed through that. Okay. Okay, so we've got that shank laid in again, and here you can see that we're, it's going into this gallery rail better. So again, I apologize about that, and it's just I just needed to move this point in right here a little bit further in is all. All right, guys. So we've got the prongs laid in. I think we've got them positioned where we want, and now what we need to do is trim the bottoms off of the prongs. So what we're going to do is isolate them. We'll come into the front view and lay in a sizing circle again. We lose our sizing circle every time we make that shank. So I'm going to lay in another sizing circle, and remember to pull the curve seam down to the bottom. We'll select these prongs and use, from the front view, we'll use wire cut to trim the bottoms of the prongs off. And then we'll fillet the bottoms by 0.15 or 0.1, something like that. Okay, we'll bring everything back real quick. And I think we'll cut our notches and our seats in now using these cutters right here. So all of the top gallery rails, we're going to Boolean difference out these basic gem shapes out of them. So now we have the seats cut. So where the gemstone sits is called a seat. Now we've cut those out. Now we're going to cut the notches out of the prongs. So select the prongs and run Boolean difference, and then click on these basic gem shapes here. And as you can see, we now have the notches in the prongs. And now we're going to mirror these prongs over, first along this way, and then across the other axis. All right. And now we have got the ring set up for production. So production, we've got these kind of tall, straight prongs with the notches cut out of them. And I always save that as a separate file. Then I make another one for the render where I have much shorter prongs, and I typically bend them over the gemstones so it has a kind of a finished look for the client to look at. So you would save this at like 3-stone ring production or something like that. And then now I'll show you how to handle making the prongs for the render. So we're just going to delete all of these prongs here. Again, so this would be a separate file at this point. That way you don't lose, you know, the work you've got put into these prong lines here. All right, so we're going to repipe these because once we cut the bottoms off and cut the notches, we lost the history on those prongs. So we're going to repipe these so we have our, because we still have history on the actual curves, just not on the pipes. Okay, so the curves have history still. So we're going to repipe these. This one gets the 0.9 millimeter diameter pipe, and these two prongs get the 0.8 millimeter diameter pipe with round caps. Okay, and then come into the side view here, select all of these curves and turn on, go to Curve Tools and Rebuild with 7 control points, okay? And then zoom in on the right hand view, turn on your edit points and grab the top point and just bend it over. You can kind of look up here and see what's happening. Okay, so that's it's bent over, but it's way too tall. So we're just going to grab both of these top points and pull it down. And I'm going to keep pulling it down. And now I think I'll even grab this point as well and just pull it down some more until we're roughly, this point here is slightly above the top of the stone. So maybe pull it down a little bit more. So about there, you know, the center of this is just above the top of the stone here. We'll zoom out a little bit so we can see these two prongs. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab the top points. Now I am grabbing the top points of both curves, okay? So when I do this in the right hand view, I'm box selecting the top point. I'm getting that top control point for both curves. And I'm going to pull it over a little bit. All right. And then I'm going to grab both points now and pull down. And this one is looking pretty good, and I think we can just leave that one as well. Okay. So and now what we would do is take the bottoms off again with that sizing circle. We'll select the prongs and wire cut the sizing circle off of them, and then fillet the bottoms of all the prongs, and then mirror them over just like before in both directions. Okay. Then bring everything back, and again this would be a separate file that we would do the render for, use to make the render. Now rendering the other one, the production model was ready for 3D printing, but 3D printing and rendering, both of those probably deserve their own separate videos, so I'm not going to go over any of that. Just know that the production model was ready to, for the next stage there would be taking it, preparing it for 3D printing. It couldn't be 3D printed as it was ready to be prepared for 3D printing. All right, so This is really done. We've done the production model and we've done the render model, and then all that's left now is maybe to go over some advanced shank options, and so we'll do that. We'll do that next. Okay, so now we're going to go over a couple of advanced shank techniques, and you can see I have reverted back to our production prong model for that. Okay, no real reason for that. I just prefer it, some personal preference. So don't worry about that. You can also do this with the rendered prong model if you want. Okay, so we're going to do two different things. One is we're going to make a kind of a fancier shank by, instead of having this fillet, flat area fillet, we'll have an arc. The other technique we'll cover is how to kind of squeeze in the bottom of the shank here to go between these two prongs. So instead of adjusting the prong angle, we could have adjusted this shank. And that's actually kind of, the way we're going to do that is a pretty cool technique that I use, you may use for other things as well. It's just because of the way it works, it makes really nice results. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is add the kind of fancier arc. So we'll just isolate everything here. And the first thing I'll do is split this shank this way with a line right here. I'm holding down Shift and snapping, clicking. So this is holding down Shift kind of constrains the line to 45-degree angles, and I'm holding down Shift and pulling straight down to make a straight up and down line. We're going to split the shank by that line, okay, and delete this half of the shank. And what we're going to do is now we're going to extract this surface right here. We don't need that, and we're going to lay in an arc right here. So I clicked on the arc tool and then clicked on start point, and we're going to snap to the bottom of this fillet, and then we're going to snap to the bottom of the fillet on the other side, and then we're going to snap to the midpoint of that flat section up top there. So now we have this kind of nice arc right here, okay? And we're going to do the same thing to the bottom. So snap, snap, and snap. You will need to have your end snaps and your mid snaps turned on for this. Now we're going to extract both fillets and this flat section that runs along the outside and delete them. Finally, we're going to run the sweep to rails, and we will use the two edges here for our rails, and then we'll click on these two arcs we just made and hit enter. And you probably want to make sure you've got maintain height turned on for this, okay? You can try it without it, and with it, in this particular case, it doesn't make any difference, and that the only reason is because the shank is the same width all the way down. If your shank, the width of your shank changed over the length of the shank, then this would become, this would actually have an effect, and you'd want to see which way you liked it best. But maintain height is typically what I go with. Okay, so now we need to join all these together, and then mirror this across this way, and join those two together. And then finally, we need to cap these open areas here. So we'll just run the cap planar command, and there we go. Finally, we do need to probably, you don't have to, but it'll look a little better in your render if you fillet these edges here. So I'm going to put a small fillet of like 0.2 on those. All right, and now we have a kind of a different style shank. So it's not necessarily a better shank. It's just a different kind of shank. So it has a different look to it, and I just wanted you to see how you could quickly give a shank that kind of look. All right. Okay, now I'm just going to back up till we have our kind of our square shank again, and bring everything back. This is where we're going to start from, and what we're going to do here is make a kind of shank that squeezes in down here. So it's a whole different, we're going to approach the shank like completely different from the get-go. Okay, so to do this advanced shank, I'm going to delete the original shank here, and we'll even delete all of the curves here, and we'll just start over. So we'll lay in the sizing circle again, which was 16.51 millimeters, and we'll bring the curve seam down to the bottom, and we will snap an ellipse to this point and then to this point, and we will split this ellipse by this point and by this point. This time around we only need this quad here, this quadrant. We don't need the entire half circle down here. Okay, we are going to use the curve blend and go from this end of this curve here, and then select point up in the command line and click on this point right here. Make sure that it's set to tangency and click OK. I'm going to lay in a line through this prong here, and I'm going to come try and keep it at the same angle of the prong, but I'm going to move it till it's a little bit past the halfway point of the prong. And we're going to take this point right here and bring it past this line here. Okay, and then we are going to offset this by 1.4, and we'll offset this by 0.9. And then we will kind of connect a line here. You can see this is that line, and we've got this line. We're going to connect using a line. We'll connect from here down into here somewhere. We just want to be past this prong pretty good. So we've got this shape here. That's going to end up being a cutout, and we will use curve boolean to make that into a single shape. So what we've got right now is this sizing circle and this kind of half arc here, and we're going to bring another line from the center of the world. We'll bring it straight down, and we will select everything, these curves here, and use curve boolean to make that into a single shape. And then we will extrude that out with both sides set to yes. We'll extrude it out 1.1 millimeters. So now we've got this kind of shape here that is 2.2 millimeters wide. We are going to use the duplicate edge and duplicate these 4 curves right here. And then we can delete this shape. We don't need it anymore. We can also delete this curve here. We don't need that anymore. So we're left with these 4 curves and these 2 prongs, and this and this and this. And you know something else that I forgot to do? We need to delete this prong here, and we'll delete all of these because these are angled out a little bit. And we will take this line right here. Well, I say angled out a little bit. We'll delete this as well. Because remember, we'll back up a little bit. This line and this line are not the same. We changed the bottom of that a little bit. Right. So I'm going to delete these prongs, these outer prongs, and also this line right here. And we will delete this line, and we'll take this line, which is what is making these prongs here, and we will just drag it and tap the Alt key to make a duplicate, and we'll flow from that line onto this line here. So we'll use the flow along curve to flow from this curve to this curve. All right, and now we will pipe that with a 0.8 pipe, and we'll just go ahead and mirror this over to the other side, and we'll mirror this one over to the other side over here. All right, and we'll grab these 2 prongs and these 2 gallery rails and these 4 curves, and we'll isolate that. Also, let's grab that and this right here, and then we will isolate all of that. And now let's loft these curves right here. Well, first let's rebuild them. So if we select all of these, come into the front view, and we will go to curve and rebuild. Make sure that they have 7 control points. You can see the maximum deviation here, which is 0.0246. So it's 2/100ths of a millimeter, which isn't much. And 7 control points is really nice. So we'll just rebuild all of those. And now you could handle this 2 ways. You could either loft all of these curves as they are. Start with the bottom curve on one side, then the upper curve on that same side, the upper curve on the other side, and then the lower curve on the other side. Hit enter. Make sure that you're set to straight sections and closed loft, and hit OK. All right. So you can either do that, and if you do it this way, when you make adjustments, you'll need to select both curves, turn on your edit points, and then like come here to the front view and select, say, those for instance, and you would use the scale function to scale them both in. All right. And you would grab maybe these and scale them in as well. Now another way that you can handle this, we'll just back up here and we'll delete this shape entirely, and we'll take these 2 lines and delete them. So you can do that first way I showed you. You can also take these lines and mirror them like that, and now you only have to adjust these curves. So whatever you do to these curves, the other curves will automatically update. Now it's hard to tell between the 2 curves, so what you might want to do is put the set of master curves on a different layer so that you can see always which ones are the ones that you need to change. You still would loft just like in the other way, in the same order. The lower curve on one side, the upper curve on the same side, the upper curve on the other side, and the lower curve on the other side. Hit enter a couple times, or hit enter and then close loft. Make sure that it's set to straight sections here and hit OK. All right, so this is our curve that we're going to mess with here. We're going to turn on the edit points, and I just know that there's an edit point there, but I will go ahead and turn on wireframe so you can see it. All right, and we're going to bring that in. So what we want is kind of a equal amount of overlap between the top of the shank and the prong and the bottom of the shank and the prong. And before we adjust the curves at all, let's bring this prong a little bit more in this direction so that it does overlap some here. So maybe something like that. And now we want about an equal amount of overlap up here as we do down here. And right now we're not getting that. Bring this back just a little bit. Something about like that. So last time when we made our shank, we actually moved the bottom of the prong to accommodate the shank. This time we're going to adjust the shank to accommodate the prong. And remember, we've got the blue curves here, and those are our master curves. So if we make any changes to them, the other curve will update, and when the other curve updates, it will change the loft as well. So I know there's a point in there, and I'm just going to bring this in a fair amount. Maybe a little bit more. And that seems to be about an even amount of overlap. Maybe it's now maybe a little bit more at the bottom than it is the top. And then just to keep it from being so abrupt here, I'm going to bring this point in a little bit as well. All right, so we're just kind of squeezing this in. And you're not limited to doing this. You can do other things with this concept. Like you could pull this out. You could pull the you could turn the edit points on this curve as well. So there's an unlimited possibility of what you can do with this technique. But for this particular model, all we're doing is pinching the bottom part of the shank into the prongs there. Okay, now once you've done this, it's kind of similar to the old way. First thing we will do is cap everything, and we'll type show. We've got this cutter here. I'll isolate everything. So we will select this and then wire cut this out here. And then we will fill it with a 0.1 fillet, that corner right there. And then we'll fillet everything else just like we did with the other shank. So 0.2, 0.2, chain edges, 0.2, chain edges, 0.2. We'll hit enter a couple times, and then we'll give some 0.5 fillets up here. Okay, and you could even do that thing with the arc. So if you wanted to do like we did, make it a little fancier, snap, snap, and snap. You could do the arcs as well, but I'm not going to do that on this go around. But you could if you wanted to. All right. So one final thing we need to do is extract this surface down here, and then mirror this shank across, like so, and join the two halves together. Bring everything back. Okay, and then finally what we need to do is we'll delete these prongs here, and we will put a notch in this prong here. And we will trim the bottom of that prong off. So I think we've lost our sizing, finger size or sizing circle again, so we'll just have to lay in a new one of those. All right, so we'll just clip the bottom of this off with the wire cut tool and add a 0.15 fillet on the bottom of that prong. And then mirror it across both directions. And let's get rid of these curves. So all right, so now we've got that shank pinched in like that. So that's just, like I said, a kind of advanced way of handling the prongs coming in at an angle. The other way was to actually move the bottom of the prong out a little bit, which is what we did the first go around. And there you go. So we have shown you how to create this 3-stone ring. We've shown you how to set it up for production and also for rendering by bending the prongs over. And we've gone over how to create not only this style of shank where it's kind of flat with large fillets on the sides, but also kind of an arc. We've shown you how to do that. And then we also have shown you how to kind of pinch the bottom side of the shank there as an advanced technique. So there's one last little thing that I want to show you. It's kind of optional, but in between the side stone and the center stone, you know, that's a little bit of a gap here. It's not too bad, and this would probably fill in if we 3D printed this model. That would probably just fill in by itself. So it's really not something you have to worry too much about in this particular ring. But you will encounter rings where this gap is a little bit bigger, and or maybe the two gallery rails don't quite connect, or they connect less than they do here. Either way, you may end up in a situation where you would like a little more solid of a connection between the gallery rails. And what you can do is grab your polyline tool, come in to the front view here, and maybe turn off O-snaps. And Keeping in your angle with this side gallery rail here, maybe come like about here, and starting over in the side gallery rail, go across over into the middle gallery rail, and then come down where you're still inside this gallery rail, and then just cross over here, staying again inside this gallery rail, and then turn O-snaps back on and close off this shape here. So we're just making kind of a little bridge here, and between these two shapes. And then from another angle, perhaps this angle here, you can extrude this, and we could snap to the center points of the prong here. So now we've got this shape right here, and it's just going to make it a little bit stronger. You could, if you wanted, you could round off these corners here. Maybe if we isolate this, maybe lay in a couple of fairly large fillets here, 0.03. Just to get rid of any sharp corners. Anyway, so now we've got this this shape connecting these two shapes. So it's a little extra strength is all, and it'll blend in with the prongs. And now we can mirror this across to the other side as well. Okay, and you can even do things like this down here as well. Of course, this is filled in quite nicely down here, but if you wanted it to be 100% smooth, you could fill this in as well. But you would trim with with the sizing circle and the offset. You might do the 1 millimeter offset up here to trim that shape with. But so I'm not gonna worry about this here. I might do that in a different project. And again, this is fairly optional in this, making these shapes here, fairly optional in this project. But it is a way to make the connection a little stronger and to fill in these little holes right here. So it kind of makes it almost like you had welded or soldered the two pieces together. So that's just a final little thought, final little thing that you can do. And that would be for production. You could do it for your render model as well, but you would definitely want to do it if you're going to do it. You want to make sure that you do it for your production model, because it really doesn't matter for a render model. I meant to show you that earlier and forgot. I just remembered it just now. All right, everyone. I know that this has been a very long video, fairly complex as well. So I know it's been kind of painful to watch, probably or at least felt very time consuming. I know that it was complicated to make, so I'm sure it was also fairly complicated to watch. But I do appreciate everyone watching it. I hope it has been helpful to somebody out there. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. And if you like learning how to design jewelry in 3D software like Rhino and perhaps eventually even Blender, please consider subscribing to my channel. Also, you may like to follow me over on Twitter. I do have a Twitter set up for the WebDunce TV channel. Right now I've only got 5 followers, and I'd love to have more of my subscribers following me over on Blender. So feel free to give me a follow over there. Again, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you in future videos.